Funding for this program is provided by Annenberg CPB to advance excellent teaching.
What can psychology tell us about the relationships among the mind, the brain, and behavior? From our reaction to embarrassing situations, to how we evaluate social groups. Past, present, and promise. This time on Discovering Psychology. What makes us similar to other people, and yet so uniquely different? Why do we think, feel, and behave as we do? Are we molded more by heredity or shaped by experience? How can the same brain that gives us the capacity for creativity, rationality, and love also become the crucible for mental illness? I'm Philip Zimbardo. We'll answer these questions and much more in the updated edition of Discovering Psychology. If there is one thing I've learned over the past 40 years as a teacher and research psychologist, it's that the study of the social animal, our relationships, our behavior, our mind, is fascinating and unending. New research, fueled by new technologies, will always add to time-tested knowledge. It's in that spirit that we updated Discovering Psychology, adding cutting-edge material to the classic content of our original series. Over the next 26 programs, we'll once again take up the challenge of understanding that most complex and puzzling creature, you, me, the human animal. We'll have to do a lot of traveling in the programs ahead, from inside the brain to outer space.
I'm going to hide little Snoopy here in his little room. Okay?
In our journey, we'll see how psychologists work.
Hide little Snoopy. I'm hiding him right.
Attempting to observe and objectively describe the behavior of humans and animals.
Good girl. You found him, didn't you? He likes it. He likes for you to find him.
They do so hoping to understand what causes that behavior to occur or to change. Psychology is formally defined as the scientific study of the behavior of individuals and of their mental processes. Psychologists then try to use their research to predict, and in some cases, control behavior. Ideally, out of their basic research will come solutions for the practical problems that plague individuals and society.
You want to look inside? Okay, you open it up for me. Okay.
So while some psychologists study mental processes simply because they are fascinating and challenging,
Mommy!
3 times 48.
others work to improve education, to reduce stress, to promote peace,
the conflict between Iran and Iraq,
and to counteract violence. And there are the dedicated people watchers who observe behavior under specially arranged conditions, measuring it and testing it. For many, the reason to study behavior is the assumption that it's an outer sign of an inner reality, a window providing a glimpse into the workings of the human mind. But psychological researchers who emphasize the essential biological basis of behavior and those who compare the behavior of different organisms study the activities of a wide variety of living creatures, not just humans. Even seemingly minor, insignificant behavior can yield important about general psychological functions, such as clues about how we process information.
Hi, I'm Mr. Dressler. Who are you?
Let's do a little psychological detective work of our own by observing some junior high school girls as they meet a handsome new teacher. Their reactions were filmed for the television series Candid Camera. Notice the difference between the girls' public behavior when the teacher is present and their private behavior once he leaves the room.
I'd like to know whether girls would like to be in my class. Thank you, Mr. Williams. Will you all bear with me? Can you have patience just a second? Let me answer this. I'll be right back.
I'm looking at him. It's gonna be a play. You can turn this down. He's young, too. He must be at least around 24.
Would you mind being in my class?
No, at least I'm with Mimi.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Excuse me a minute. Will you all wait for me just one second? Thank you.
The behavior of dozens of girls in this situation was captured by Candid Camera producer Alan Funt. Let's focus on just one aspect of their many reactions. Why are these girls laughing? When I asked a large number of my students about the girls' behavior, they came up with a range of explanations. That the girls were laughing because they were either nervous, excited over their good fortune, showing their friends how cool they were, or laughing in eager anticipation of a novel event. Feeling self-conscious, feeling sexually aroused, or lastly, and by far the most common explanation, that they were simply showing a typical reaction of adolescent girls. Of course, if the last explanation were true, then we'd expect to see different behavior from a group of adolescent boys. Let's see what happens if we repeat the same situation using boys and an out-of-the-ordinary female teacher.
What's your name?
Charles Birdwood.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Joe Paul.
Nice to meet you. My name is Miss Darling, and I'm going to be a new teacher in social studies.
Despite some behavioral differences between them, the boys had the same basic reaction as the girls.
You're wanted on the phone, Miss Darling. Would you follow me, please?
Oh, would you wait here for me a couple of minutes? Right back.
But before we try to answer why the youngsters reacted as they did, ask yourself how you reacted as a viewer. Did you laugh too? If so, ask yourself why. Was it because, as most of my students thought, we naturally tend to empathize with the children because we remember being in awkward situations at that age too? Or was it because you felt uneasy observing their private reactions to sexual titillation, a kind of voyeur's guilt? Or did you laugh because you experienced a violation of expectations about how teachers are supposed to look and act, remembering back to how your teachers actually look and behave? Were you reacting emotionally to the same violation of expectations that the children were experiencing? Whatever type of behavior psychologists look at, whether it's laughing, crying, making war or making love, or anything else, they try to make sense of it by relating the observed behavior to certain aspects of the individual involved and the situation in which the behavior occurred. For example, my genetic makeup, personality traits, attitudes, and mental state are some of the personal factors involved in my behavior. They're known as dispositional factors. They're internal, characteristics and potentials inside me. While external things such as sensory stimulation, rewards, or the actions of other people are known as situational factors, they come from the outside, from the environment in which my behavior takes place. If you want a graphic lesson in the influence of situational factors, take a look at this picture. Which is the tallest cowboy? Which is the shortest? Seems obvious, doesn't it? Now let's isolate them from their background context and compare them. You can see how the context of the situation, in this case the picture's background, misled your perception and judgment. Or take a look at this sign and read it out loud. Paris in the spring, right? But this is what it really says. Another violation of expectations, a case where your past experience creates a dispositional readiness to respond in a particular way. At the University of Illinois, psychologist Emmanuel Donchin discovered that even before we are consciously aware that our expectations have been violated, our brains have registered the event as peculiar. To study this phenomenon, Donchin has been making recordings of the brain's electrical activity, known as electroencephalograms or EEGs.
The basic procedure we use is very simple. We put the standard EEG electrodes on a person's head and record the brain activity as the clinician records in a hospital. And then we create a series of events which repeat themselves, the same event over and over again. And our computers look at the brain activity and filter out the specific response to the events in which we're interested. And it turns out that this response to these events, which is called an event-related potential, has a series of waves in it.
Donchin is particularly interested in the P300 wave, the brain's characteristic response to an unexpected but important event.
You see a wave that begins about 250 thousandths of a second after a surprising and relevant event. It reaches a peak about 300 milliseconds, at least 300 milliseconds, after the surprising event, and then there's a return to the baseline and subject's brain activity settles down.
In this experiment, Donchin elicits the P300 wave by presenting his subject with surprises in a list of names. Most of the names are men's names. Occasionally, there's an unexpected woman's name. The subject clicks a different button for male and female. In the laboratory, monitors reveal that the brain responds to the unexpected names with the P300 wave.
If an event triggers an emotional response in the subject or produces some cognitive activity by the subject, we're interested in finding out the extent to which this emotional response or cognitive activity changes the way in which this brain activity that we can record behaves. And by looking at changes in brain activity in relation to psychological process, we are trying to understand better the relationship between the mind and the brain.
When we study the smallest and most detailed processes of behavior, like the P300 brainwaves, we operate on what's known as the micro level of analysis. Typically, the micro level is used by psychologists who study things like the role of the brain in memory, for instance, or of hormones in sexual behavior. But most psychologists operate on the next level, the molecular level of analysis, which studies somewhat larger units of observable behavior.